So what did you think about the brief moments of climate change debate that happened tonight?
Yeah, I mean, it basically amounted to almost nothing. There are not a lot of issues that you can substantively discuss in 30 seconds. I would say climate change is one of the toughest ones. I think that we heard just enough to get an idea that some of these candidates are willing to acknowledge that it's happening, but obviously are not prepared to actually do what's necessary to stop it. I think that came through clearly to me. I hope that comes through clearly to people who don't pay as much attention to this. I'm not sure. Hopefully that will get sussed out during the climate town halls that are coming up in the next month. There was one or two quick things I wanted to say, though. One, the strategy from CNN I found to be very frustrating, where they clearly designed this where they were going to bombard the candidates with questions from a far-right point of view to attempt to tear down Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. And they were going to use the centrists that are here tonight as their pawns, instigating conflict between them, to do that in a way that not only that in their view would hurt Bernie and Warren, but insulates Biden from being the guy who went after them. So we'll see if they go with more kid gloves tomorrow and don't try to instigate fights between him and Harris or anything like that. But I found that to be quite frustrating.
Well, I'm going to disagree pretty strongly with John's assessment there, because I think that they were the two front runners. They were in the middle. I think it was unquestionably framing that would never be asked of Biden. Nobody would ever ask is Joe Biden's positions too moderate to beat Donald Trump in 2020. It's inconceivable that would get asked. So I agree with John on that point. But I mean, there was not an attempt to take down those people. That was there was
an attempt to take down Sanders just based on the framing of the questions. Everything was framed in the context of, this is Bernie Sanders' policy. Do you think this policy is too extreme?
Right, and Bernie Sanders' policy, I mean, that's good for Bernie Sanders.
It is.
Because Bernie Sanders has controlled the dialogue of the Democratic Party for the last 2 years. Hasn't gone as far as he wanted, but he has totally pushed its direction. So those are logical questions to ask. And Elizabeth Warren has risen in the polls. She more than anybody else, she is the new darling, and to focus on those two who are ideological compatriots make the most sense in the world. And we know from reporting before the debate that turned out to be completely accurate that the moderates in that debate, that moderates and even further to the right, center-right Democrats, were going to go after them regardless of the question. They were going to target those. Their plan was to damage them and be the moderate who rises up into the top tier.
But I agree with John in the fact that from the perspective of the questions that were being asked were the far right things, these policies are cuckoo, and what do you say about that, as opposed to asking the questions from the perspective of the people who all the people want to know. But it's always framed from this extreme policy that you have. We want to know, we want to ask you about this extreme policy, as opposed to asking them the questions from the perspective of the United States of America.
So before you jump in, Ben, I actually want to go to sound where Bernie calls them out on the GOP framing. And it was a great moment in my opinion. Let's take a quick look at that.
Jake, your question is a Republican talking point. At the end of the day, and by the way, the healthcare industry will be advertising tonight on this program.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Warren, it's your turn.
Oh, can I complete that, please?
Your time is up, 30 seconds.
Advertising tonight with that talking point.
Boom.
Yeah, no, it was great. And by the way, and I thought one of the best answers to that, because again, you want to break through. Bernie said it, you expect Bernie to say it, and he was right. And it was that, and that's unquestionably true, that the framing, I just don't think that was an intentional, we're gonna get Bernie Sanders, and I think it's important that we don't talk that way. Pete Buttigieg said his answer to that question was, hey man, this is a distinction without a difference. The costs are gonna go down. That's the important thing here, and so that was, I thought, a very effective way to answer that question from Mayor Pete. But no question that is framed as that is the way Mitch McConnell, that is the way Kevin McCarthy, that's the way they want that question asked.
So I want to pivot back to climate change, because there was a moment where Bernie Sanders and who was he debating with? Okay, so there's a debate about how far you can go with climate change proposals, and the big argument is that the Green New Deal is unreasonable. It's not something that you can get bipartisan support for, and this was the response from Bernie Sanders. And look, understand that we're going to Bernie Sanders a lot because there were a lot of questions asked with the framing of, this is what Bernie Sanders is proposing, what do you think?
Nobody wanted to see the Amy Klobuchar, Steve Bullock debate.
Right, that's exactly right. So let's take a quick look at this moment. And John, pay close attention because I'm really curious to hear what you think.
I get a little bit tired of Democrats afraid of big ideas. Republicans are not afraid of big ideas. They could give $1 trillion in tax breaks to billionaires and profitable corporations. They could bail out the crooks on Wall Street. So please don't tell me that we cannot take on the fossil fuel industry and nothing happens unless we do that. Here is the bottom line. We got to ask ourselves a simple question. What do you do with an industry that knowingly, for billions of dollars in short-term profits, is destroying this planet? I say that is criminal activity that cannot be allowed to continue.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Congressman.
You know, Sanders didn't, focus one of his answers or several of his answers primarily on corruption, right? Buttigieg did a good job in giving a brief, concise and strong answer on government corruption and what needs to be done about it. He mentioned a constitutional amendment, but woven into almost every answer from Bernie Sanders is the issue of government corruption. So he brought it up in this context, the fossil fuel industry and how it corrupts politicians. And that's the reason why, we're not doing enough or doing anything nearly enough to combat climate change.
So guys, but with Bernie Sanders, the issue is very simple. Like, he has expanded what he talks about from 2016 a little. That was an answer right there, a little bit different than 2016. But people know him. They like him. Right, he still polls incredibly high. His approval rating, especially among Democrats, is I think the highest. He's certainly in the top tier. I think he's number one. So the question is he does an answer like that convince anybody to move to him, right? And it may be, and if they don't, right, if none of this works and they don't move to him, it means that people haven't thought on Bernie and they've sort of made up their minds on him. Because it's much easier for Elizabeth Warren to break through because they don't know him. It's much easier for Pete Buttigieg to break through because they don't know her, and they don't know him, and they don't know Beto O'Rourke. He can't do it anyway. Biden, they know, harder for him. People want him to be sort of stable, and the guy. So Kamala Harris can break through. So Bernie is trying, and I appreciate that. And I think that to what Cenk said, he didn't try hard enough in the first debate.
Yeah,
he's trying here. I will be curious. I have no clue what's going to happen, but Bernie has been in the neighborhood of 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 for a very long time. If he's going to win the nomination, doesn't have to be right now, but at some point,
it would have to be right now.
Move.
Let's keep it real.
No, I mean, he could be in a month. It could be after we get a couple more debates. I mean, it could be in the next 6 weeks, but it's got to start happening as we get into the fall that he has got to make a move because nobody is unaware of how Bernie Sanders presents a case for what he thinks America ought to look like. Everybody else who went after the progressives tonight, Tim Ryan, Steve Bullock, John Hickelberg, they're praying for the opportunity to tell people what their vision for America is. Bernie has made his point. Now he is fine-tuning his point, and I'm curious to see whether he can get people back who he had in 2016 or grow to some other dissatisfied voters.
So John, Bernie Sanders mentions how important it is to dream big. We need big ideas. Let's turn that dial of ideas to extra, extra hot. Is that going to resonate with voters? Do you think that's the type of answer that's going to resonate not only with people who supported him in 2016, but additional voters this time around?
In a vacuum, I would still hope so. I can't guarantee it. And yeah, we'll have to see. I think that answer was a great example of he has the right thing to say. We can't say with any certainty whether or not people are going to jump onto it. But I mean, it's not in a vacuum. It's on a stage with a bunch of people who are making clear in the way that Elizabeth Warren pointed out that they are effectively running for president to just everybody simmer down on your expectations for what could possibly happen. And that is not a recipe for shooting up in the polls. And tonight it wasn't Biden, but Biden is a lot closer to those people, both in terms of what he wants to actually accomplish as president. I would also say in his ability to communicate about it than he is to Elizabeth Warren or to Bernie Sanders. And while Bernie Sanders, I don't think is going to fundamentally change people's opinion of him at this point. a lot of people, I think, have a somewhat false view of who Joe Biden is as a candidate. And that, I think, probably will inevitably change over time as we have more debates like this.
Yeah, John, totally right, no question. Joe Biden has had 3 cracks at the national stage, and he's 0 for 3. He failed in 2 presidential runs when he was like Beto O'Rourke was sort of thought of as, oh no, this guy's got to look at Joe Biden. This guy's going to be a great candidate. And then he just wasn't. And then Anita Hill was an embarrassment. Like, he's 0 for 3 on the national stage. He got his national. Was a reliable senator from Delaware who would never not get reelected following his family tragedy, and that's an easy state to win reelection in. And he had his it was seen as a very knowledgeable guy on foreign affairs, but as a national figure, he was dead in the water. Except he was rescued by the one single person who would have picked him to be vice president. By a black guy with a crazy name who needed to tell white Democrats mostly, hey, I know you want to vote for me and I know you're scared, but it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And Joe Biden was, you think if John Kerry hadn't run in 2004, that would have been John Kerry and not Joe Biden. So Joe Biden got rescued by Barack Obama, and now we have decided again, oh no, he's a national figure and a uniter, and I don't buy it. I don't think it's going to happen, and I think we're just waiting until he collapses. Then again, I could totally be wrong.
John, I want to ask you a question while we are talking about race. What is the makeup of the people who were in attendance? Because I noticed when they talked about the HBCUs, Elizabeth Warren talked about funding the HBCUs. I heard a lot of cheers when we talked about the race. When Marianne Williamson talked about race and Flint and it being racist, I heard a lot of cheers and the reparations. Was there a lot of people of color in the audience?
Well, I can't speak specifically to the audience because there's no way they're ever going to let me in that room. But in terms of the press room, I can say I'm looking around now, and I mean, the majority of the people here are white, but I would say that it's probably not the mix that you would expect. I talked with a number of people who seem to work for either local radio stations, local TV stations, and they were more likely to be non-white. I think that because this is located in Detroit, there is a more diverse mix, I would say, of people covering it. I don't know in terms of like their guests or anything like that might be in the room. But the room I'm seeing right now is not as insanely white as I would have expected it would be at something like this.
2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below. Then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.